And welcome to an extra not-so-special Memorial Day edition, or pre-Memorial Day edition that will release on Memorial Day. Edition, I don't know how many times I'm going to say edition in this intro, of Beerfield Fantasy Football. I am your host at Hot BFF with two P's, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri. As always, joined by the wonderful wonders of technology by Dan Thury at Thury BFF. Dan, how you doing?
Well, I survived this weekend. I was telling Hopper off air because I work for a beverage depot. I think we sold like 1,000 cases of Miller Lite in 3 days.
Yeah.
It just says anything. People have shitty taste, but I'm a little spent.
Yep, Dan's a little spent. I'm pretty well rested. I mean, I was fighting with AT&T all day yesterday. For those that are wondering, they are the absolute worst. If you have the chance to get them as your cell phone provider, don't. If you have them as your cell phone provider, get away, because they're absolutely terrible. They tried to pull a switch on me for my plan and bump me up by something that would have cost me about $70 more a month without my consent. So I did a little yelling. Old Hot BFF with two P's did some yelling. But hey, we're here to have some fun. We're here to relax. It's a Memorial Day. We're happy to have a beer on our hands. We're happy that you are here with us. As always, you can follow the show, Twitter, Instagram, Untapped, Beerfield FF, Beerfield Fantasy Football on Facebook and YouTube, which I almost forgot to start the live stream on today. That's about the level of competence this show has. We also have a merch and Patreon. And hey, we got something new for you today. So we've been doing rookies for about the last month and a half, at least. So we're finally going to switch gears and start previewing each of the 8 divisions over the next 2 months as we lead up kind of towards training camps and through the summer. Going to go ahead and break down each team, and then obviously as things change, we'll keep you updated through the news segment. But today we're going to get started with the AFC East. So we're going to go through, kind of talk some storylines from each team. Through that, you'll get some sleepers we like, some guys we don't like. Here's some of our projections as we go through and try to pretend like we know what's going to happen, and then 4 weeks into the season, we'll realize we had no idea. But it's a good little exercise we like to do every season. So thank you for being with us. Let's go ahead and get into what's fueling the field, and let's see if I can get the drop right this week.
What's fueling Beerfield?
Hey. Dan, what do you got?
I got Brony. That's from Illuminated Brew. They're out of Chicago. This is a double dry hop, double IPA, Citra, Roteca. I'm sure I'm going to get blasted on Twitter for pronouncing these rounds. But if you've been watching the show long enough, you know I pronounce everything, Ron.
He does.
So this is a massive hot bomb of things, and it's already tasty as a quick preview to what I'm going to talk about later.
All right, and I have Flamingo Dreams from Left Hand Brewing. It is a berry blonde nitro ale, which if you've ever opened the can on a nitro ale, it'll scare the shit out of you. But I have not even taken a sip of this yet. I will be sipping on it as the show goes on, though, and we'll let you know what I think about halfway through the actual division preview. Before we do that, we've got to go over the news of this past week.
News.
All right. Starting with the news that broke today, the NFL suspends Ben Watson for 4 games for violating their PED policy. Watson admitted to taking performance-enhancing drugs while he was retired, but apparently they didn't clear his system before he got back. The Patriots were aware of this, and it is not expected to affect his team's standing.
I mean, it won't really affect much of anything. Maybe AHA needs to fill a little bit more in those first 4 weeks, but
And it's still useless.
Yeah. And it's still useless. So, little foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Tight ends.
Right. Foreshadowing what we're going to talk about when we get to the Patriots. Speaking of the Patriots, in roster news, they signed Julian Edelman to a 2-year, $18 million extension through 2021. He didn't look like he lost a step. This locks him up through his age 35 season, so likely through the rest of his career.
I'm a big fan of Edelman this year.
Yep.
So far.
The Raiders signed tight end Eric Swope and released quarterback Landry Jones. So, yay. I mean, Swope's at least intriguing. He flashed a bit with the Colts, and the Raiders do have a wide open tight end spot.
They do.
Not that it will get a lot. Maybe. I don't know.
Probably
We haven't gotten to the AFC West yet.
We're not quite there yet.
No. And the Jets signed wide receiver Deontay Thompson. Thompson, a journeyman who spent time with the Bears, Cowboys, and Bills in recent years. 17 receptions for 167 yards. Not likely to be anything more than a potential depth piece on that team.
He'll probably won't even make the roster.
Yep. In injury news, it is OTAs, so we do have a lot of injury news to update you on. Carson Wentz is going to be a full participant. That was kind of expected, but that's good news as he comes off of was a microfracture or a stress fracture in his back.
Yeah, he had he wasn't quite right after with the knee injury, and then his back was never really quite right. So just good to see him get healthier.
Yep.
That's all.
Him being a full participant is good news to start the season. You won't be in a Nick Foles situation like you were last year with Nate Sudfeld, which is scary. Yeah. Cole Beasley is not participating in OTAs due to core muscle surgery. He's not expected to miss training camp, so not sure what they fixed. They didn't really go into details as to what they fixed there, but sounds like he'll be full go come training camp. But missing OTAs on a new team usually is not good for getting out of the gates quick.
Yeah.
Keeping it with the Bills, tight end Tyler Kroft suffered a broken foot. He's expected to be out till the end of September. More on this later, but it is a unique opportunity for Dawson Knox now.
It is.
There's really nothing behind him as pass catchers.
No.
So Lee Smith is a blocker. Jags wide receiver Marquise Lee will not participate in OTAs. He's not expected back until late in training camp. Came off a knee surgery. Was working out on his own on a side field. So he's familiar with the offense. He'll be fine.
Well, I mean, lots changed though.
Yep.
New head coach, new quarterback, a bunch of.
The Jags don't have a new head coach. Marone's still there.
Isn't it the guy, our old OC from the Vikings?
Not. No, he's the new OC, I think. But Marone didn't get fired.
See, I should care more about Jacksonville, but this offense.
Yeah. More on them in a few weeks.
Yes.
Deshaun Hamilton claims a knee injury slowed him down late last season, which we did kind of see him flash a little bit and then fall off the map. I think it was like 7.3 yards per attempt, which explains why he didn't show more after the Demaryius Thomas trade.
I mean, that or the offense just slowed him down because it wasn't like the offense was.
Also true. No specifics on what the knee injury was, but sure.
I'm a big fan of him this year either way, so hopefully he gets healthier.
Titans tight ends are still banged up. Johnny Smith will be sidelined to start OTAs as he recovers from a torn MCL. Meanwhile, Delaney Walker declared himself as, quote, 85% healthy.
I think the correct answer is just avoid this tight end core.
For now.
Redraft.
For now.
You're right. For now. We're big fans of Smith and a healthy Walker, so.
Yep. Chris Carson had, quote, a little work done on his knee per Coach Pete Carroll. He's vague on details, but they're not expecting him to miss a ton of time. He should resume practicing in a few weeks. Probably just a cleanup procedure, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, Carson's he doesn't have the pitcher model of health there, so hopefully it's nothing more.
Speaking of
you're a penny owner, like I am in some leagues.
Gross. Speaking of people that aren't the model of health, I hope you're sitting down for this one. Ready?
I'm ready.
Matt Breida has a slightly torn pec, a.k.a. a torn pec. He's expected to be ready for camp, but he's going to miss most of OTAs.
Isn't another running back, too? I thought, is it Mostert that's also hurt?
Yeah, Mostert.
Yes.
Yeah, he had to have, or Mozart, whatever. He had to have his forearm surgery redone after he broke it last season.
That's right. Well, at least that crowded backfield is starting to kind of clear up.
Yeah, because McKinnon and Coleman are the only two healthy right now.
That's right.
Panthers tight end Greg Olson's been medically cleared for all football activities. He is not retired. This
does something.
This proves it.
I also love Ian Thomas. Like as much as I love Greg Olson, this makes me kind of sad.
Yeah. Well,
I like Ian Thomas in this offense.
Another year.
Yeah.
Won't hurt. Devonta Freeman's a full participant in OTAs, so he's been kind of off forgotten after his injury last year, and I don't think he should necessarily be forgotten about.
No, because, we like Edo Smith, but he's not a Tevin Coleman, I don't think, full-fledged replacement. So if Freeman can remain healthy, throughout preseason and throughout the season. He could be a nice little value for you guys out there in this second and third rounds.
Yeah, if he doesn't catch fire, and really he's a guy that in Dynasty may actually be worth targeting.
I agree.
Saints wide receiver Cameron Meredith has yet to resume practicing as this contract continues to look just like a terrible deal.
Pretty much is.
All right, and I have one LOL news item, which is LOL for me and probably won't be for you.
I know.
Laugh out loud news of the week.
This actually made me smile more than it made me laugh. Lamar Jackson admitted he is, quote, still having issues throwing the football consistently, which is kind of an important part of being a quarterback.
Oh, man. See, as a Ravens fan, this hurts. I've never been a big fan of Jackson. I think last year it was pick 32, so I was pretty hammered when it happened, but I was screaming at the TV when they made this pick. But not looking good for this passing offense if Jackson can't throw the football consistently.
Yeah. Not at all.
No.
Which we kind of expected, though. They loaded up with speed and deep guys, but if Jackson can't throw the football, you're going to be running a ton of jet sweeps, a ton of read option, trying to collegeize this offense. And again, the Chargers put out a blueprint for that. It's not good. I am not liking the Ravens' prospects this season.
It is not like any of the speed guys last year got it done. I mean, John Brown was massively,
he was pretty
terrible with this offense last year. So
more on that later.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, he was pretty atrocious.
Yeah.
So that's all we got for news. Just a lot of updates, not a whole lot of impactful stuff. Obviously, with all the injury news, just keep in mind it is the offseason. So we try to keep you updated for it. But, I mean, right now it's all just kind of monitor the situation. So not going to be a ton of impacts to discuss there. And anything that's contract signing at this point in the offseason is mostly just depth pieces. So barring, injuries that are going to hold guys out or anything like that, it is a relatively slow news time. That being said, let's get into something that's not slow and start previewing this season.
Division preview.
All right, let's start out with the Buffalo Bills. We're going to run through this in ABC order. We'll talk about some key points for each team, any must-owns that are there, and then we'll kind of take a shot at predicting the actual finish. So for the Bills, I don't see anybody on Buffalo that is a surefire top 24. I have to own them.
Yeah, I think there'll be people out there who really buy into Josh Allen, into that rushing upside and potential, and then him getting better as a passer. Because I've seen him in top 12 on lists. I'm pretty sure Jason Moore, shout out to the Ballers for some reason. If you're listening, hello. I think he had him at 6. This is Josh Allen. So
I don't have him at 6, and it's hard for me to say because we haven't finished previews yet. I did project him for some marginal improvements as a passer. Not anything major yet, but marginal. And I did think he kept the rushing floor up. I do have him over 300 points, but I don't think that that's going to put him, so it may put him top 10, but it's more of a not really solid ground top 10 because it's Josh Allen, and it doesn't feel great ranking him that highly, even though he might end up there based on my projections.
I have to ask, did you do 4-point touchdowns?
I did it based off your league scoring, so I think I did 5.
You did 5? Okay, so for 5 I have, because I did 4, 5, and 6, and then I did my points per game based off of 4, which is I think is the most.
Yeah, I didn't, and I don't have that sheet up right now. I've got the worksheet I used to do all the projections, but I don't have the one where I plug it in for points up.
Yeah, I'm slightly below you on that, but we'll get to him
in a minute.
Yeah.
Yep. So some key stories to look at here. The first one is going to be who emerges from this wide receiver core of Zay Jones, Cole Beasley, John Brown, and Robert Foster. Who's going to lead him in targets for you, Dan? And who do you see being better than people anticipate, and who do you see disappointing? If anybody?
I have Zay Jones. I got him at 96 targets. I'm not as versed in doing my projections. I'm a year behind with Chris here, and then Nick when he did them last year as well. So I'm still I'm kind of fine tuning how I do it. But I got Zay Jones 96 targets. John Brown. I know you and I are flipped on Brown and Foster,
Mhm.
but that could change at any point in time because it's still only May here when we're doing these division previews. So I got Zay Jones leading the way, but no one really stands out because I don't see a whole massive improvement for Josh Allen. I see some. I see a little bit less running, a little bit more throwing.
Well, they improved the offensive line a lot too, which means he's not going to be
That is
scrambling
true.
for his life.
And that's where obviously his yards would come from. But Zay Jones did look very consistent last year. It just really depends on who they throw out there. Because if Robert Foster is going to start, and then John Brown, and then what do they do with with Zay Jones and Cole Beasley? Without us really knowing who their top three guys are going to go out there, it's tough to say. Zay Jones, I think you can agree with me, is going to be their likely target leader. It's just what he does with it because he can't catch the football very well.
So I've got Zay Jones. I'm I'm right there with you. I've got him at 101 targets, which is right on pace with where he was last season. I do think he's the front runner here. He amassed 102 targets last season while also massively improving his catch rate. So you mentioned he can't catch the football. He was at 54.5% last season, which is above the Kelvin Benjamin line. So that's the mediocrity line. So if he can continue to improve that, that's good. But where he really stood out was in the red zone. He got 7 touchdowns, which I didn't necessarily realize right out the gate. He was second in red zone target share in the league as well. And red zone efficiency, I believe he was also top 10. So I do think Zay Jones is probably the best wide receiver to own here, although I do think he's on that fringe wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. And then you mentioned Robert Foster. He's a guy that I think is going to be better than a lot of people think that he will be. I've got Robert Foster pegged second in targets on this team, I think. Hold on, I gotta vet that.
Yeah, I know for me.
I got him at 88 targets. So
okay, so we basically flipped John Brown and Robert Foster. It's just whoever you think is going to be out there and start. And this could, like I said, will massively change as we go throughout the summertime. So I do have Foster as the number 4 receiver, so I don't have him seen him as much playing or as much.
See, I've got Brown as the number 4 receiver. I think we both had Beasley as 3. So the reason I lean towards Foster, though, is when you look at the rapport he had with Josh Allen and all the quarterback metrics that Player Profiler, shout out to them, has as it pertains to wide receivers, him and Josh Allen were top 10 in just about everything, especially with deep balls.
They were massively efficient, especially towards the end.
First in target quality rating, which is essentially how well can a quarterback throw to that wide receiver. They were first in the entire league with that. 12th in targeted quarterback rating, led the league in average target distance and yards per receptions. And on the John Brown thing, the reason I have them flipped, I went back and did some digging on John Brown, and truth be told, outside of that one season, he hasn't been that great, health issues aside. This is a guy that 3 out of his 5 seasons, you talk about guys that have an atrocious catch rate. He's been under 50% 3 of those 5 seasons. He was 43.3% last season on 97 targets. 72nd in the league on separation, 103rd in true catch rate, which removes uncatchable balls. So that means that balls he should have caught, he was 103rd in actually catching them, and 82nd in yards after the catch. Just 20% of uncontested balls for a guy that's 5'10". So if you're taking speed guys, you got one that's 6'2", that can win some contested balls, and another one that's 5'10", equally as fast, and can't. So I also have some concerns about the cold climate and his hamstrings. So that's why I'm a little bit down on John Brown. Just when you look at the overall body of work outside of that one season, everybody wants John Brown to be good. I think everybody's rooting for John Brown to be good, but he hasn't been outside of that 1 year.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I know when I did my digging, I did look at what Robert Foster did because John Brown was likely brought in to play what Robert Foster was last year. So he has a better deep ball thrower. He wasn't the worst with Joe Flacco. Like if you're going to compare what he's had the last 2 times, Flacco's a lot more Josh Allen than Lamar Jackson.
That's the counter argument because when you look at the quarterback stuff, Flacco's not Josh Allen throwing the ball deep. So it'll be interesting, and I could see either one of us being right coming out of that.
But either way, I don't really want to own anybody.
No. I mean, I own Robert Foster in Dynasty. He's a back of the roster guy for me.
Yeah, and that's completely fine too.
Zay Jones, I'm going to be fine with if I can get him in the mid-late rounds. Just tossing him out there for a guy that's going to get 100-plus targets, and if I have to start him in a flex spot in a pinch, I'm fine with that. But I'm not targeting any of these guys, to say the least. So looking at the running backs, so they added Frank Gore, they added TJ Yeldon. Does McCoy bounce back, and what type of role do you see them having as far as Yeldon and Gore?
I have LaShawn McCoy at playing 13 games, and it's going to be just a competition with Frank Gore. I don't necessarily hate what he was able to do with Josh Allen when he was healthy last year, which was pretty tough to see because he was banged up for the majority of that second half of the year. At least I felt like it was. So he won't bounce back in a way of what we've seen of McCoy of past, but I think he'll be serviceable. I got him with 80. I got him with just shy of 900 total yards, 5 touchdowns in total, and just shy of 60 targets. I think he'll fill a bye week role. And if the offense does take the next step, if the offensive line does improve, I wouldn't be shocked. I don't think Frank Gore is going to do much. I like TJ Yeldon, but he's been a backup for his whole career, and everyone knows our thoughts on Devin Singletary.
I didn't even project Devin Singletary.
I did all the rookies.
That's my thoughts on Devin Singletary. I didn't even see him worth projecting. As for McCoy and Yeldon, I'm right there with you. I've got LaShawn McCoy, I think 926 scrimmage yards projected. I don't see him carrying the ball more than 200 times. I got him at 161 rush attempts. I don't think he bounces back to be an RB1 or even an RB2. He's a flex play. I don't really see his efficiency bouncing back. They did improve the line. I just don't see him necessarily being the workhorse here. TJ Yeldon, I've got him coming in, carrying the ball about 100 times, which does not necessarily make him serviceable in any capacity unless McCoy misses time. And I don't have him taking a ton of pass work away from McCoy either. So, and Frank Gore's just a change of pace guy for me. LaShawn McCoy, when running backs start to dwindle in that 6th, 7th, 8th round, sure, you can go ahead and take a shot at it. They did improve that offensive line. So, there's a chance that we could be projecting him wrong. And even if we aren't, that's still 900 scrimmage yards is still okay flex value. But he's not a guy that I'm targeting in the top, 4 or 5 rounds like we did in previous years.
Oh no, of course. And like his points per game for me is going to be at least decently enough to take a chance, and that's
slightly more than the 9 last year.
Yeah, I got him at 10 because I only have him playing 13 games. I do expect him at some point to get banged up because that's just what he does now. And he's also, if they decide not to bring 4 running backs, he could be a cut candidate. They did sign Frank Gore, they did sign TJ Yeldon, and they just drafted Singletary. They would also save cap. So if there's any sort of pinch they need for whatever reason, McCoy could be gone. And just with all the off the issues that he's brought to that team the last couple of years.
Yep, for sure. We talked about it in the opening, but Dawson Knox, Tyler Kroft. I don't know about you, but I don't really see either of these guys necessarily being redraft relevant, especially given, we're still trying to find where Charles Clay went. He's still missing. Face is still on the side of milk cartons.
Right.
He may turn up in Arizona someplace, rumor has it, but that's just all speculation. It's like hunting for a missing child. Dawson Knox, at least has, from a dynasty perspective, I think should be drafted and has an interesting opportunity to try to break camp. And, I think best case scenario, you're looking at a Chris Herndon type of season from last year, but he's had health issues, and I don't think that you're going to get even that. I think you're just going to get some flashes. So I think these tight ends are kind of a piece to avoid.
Yeah, you're not drafting them in redraft, and I think they're still almost avoidable in 2 tight ends with premium scoring. Just because I think when Kroft gets back from his injuries, he'll likely be the starter again, just because he's got some time in the league. If Dawson Knox shows anything, we liked him as a project piece as a tight end just because he didn't do much with Ole Miss. It's
right.
But he was banged up a lot, as you just mentioned.
He's going to be pressed into duty, though, because outside of Tyler Kroft, Lee Smith is the next option, and he's a pure blocker. So I I don't see either of these guys being that great. And then we talked about Josh Allen a bit in the opening also. Can he maintain his rushing floor while also improving his passing? And the way that I projected it, and I think you're similar here, is I did project him to have marginal improvements in his completion percentage, his interception rate, and his touchdown percentage, but nothing horrendously major. I did drop him a little bit on his rushes per games. I do still think running is going to be a big part of his game. But I don't see him taking, for example, we'll talk about later, the same steps I see Sam Darnold taking.
No, I don't see that either. Just on top of the fact that they don't have a whole trusted weapons for him to actually use. As much as we have talked about, this receiving core is not a top 10 receiving core in this league. So I have him improving as well, not by a lot, because I don't expect this offense to be great. Mm-mm. So I don't expect a lot of throwing touchdowns to begin with. He was wildly inconsistent, throughout college and, from last year in terms of his
what did you project his touchdowns to interceptions to be?
16 to 14.
I got him 19 to 16. So we're in the same range.
Exactly. He, just all based on what you think he, what this offense can produce. You're not, we're not that far off from each other. I still got him at 6 rushing touchdowns. I think he had 8 last year.
That's exactly what I have him at 6 rushing touchdowns. What'd you get his rush yards at?
682.
768 from me. So I got him being, I think, a little more efficient or carrying it a few more times. But they did, like we talked about, they did improve the offensive line. So I don't think he has to scramble for his life as much.
Yeah, there won't be so many of that one read and go because he's feeling pressure. And just they did improve this receiving core. So you could see him using more. Cole Beasley is probably the best slot receiver he's had ever.
Yeah. Yep. And Cole Beasley is the reason I projected his completion percent to go up by like 1.5%.
So
that's the sole reason for that.
Yeah, I'm not super high on him. I've drafted Josh Allen in a lot of best ball leagues because I like his floor. Especially given I still think he's going to take off for run, because I don't think he's going to be he won't always be super comfortable in the pocket. And I think he, just like we saw with Blake Bortles, he likes to take off and scramble. And when he does, he's massively efficient at that, especially with those touchdowns, because they don't have a whole lot of goal line backs.
For sure. All right. Anything else on the Bills before we move on to the Dolphins?
No.
Okay.
Got it. Dolphins.
And Cole Beasley, by the way, we both projected him to be the 3rd in the pecking order on that team. Not a whole lot of change from what he was with Dallas, by the way.
No, I'm not a big fan of Cole Beasley. Not a great fit for Josh Allen, because that's his weakest part of his game.
Does help Josh Allen a bit, but doesn't really help Cole Beasley any. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on to the Dolphins then. The Dolphins, I also, before I projected this, I didn't see them as having any must-owns. There is a compelling argument for Kenyon Drake that I'll get to.
I fucking love Kenyon Drake.
Probably right now, then. Let's just go ahead and get into that. Will they finally feature him, or is it going to be an annoying timeshare between Drake, Ballage, and Gaskin? What do you think?
It's going to be an annoying timeshare between Drake and Ballage. This was really tough to project because they changed their entire offense. So I went back and kind of looked at the last time they had a combo of speed and power back. That was when they had Bush and Daniel Thomas. Gross, by the way. But what's nice is that Drake should get used in the passing game. I don't see him getting I think he had upper 70s to 80s in targets, but I do expect him to be massively relevant in that role. But Ballage will, again, like Frank Gore last year, will take his rushes. I expect him to run the football a bit more. I got Drake at 168 rushes. I got Ballage at 150. I just don't expect a lot from Myles Gaskin unless an injury occurs or someone sucks. But Drake, 8 total touchdowns, almost 1,200 total yards. I do believe in him in the passing game. We saw that last year, and when he was featured and he was able to produce, it was through the air. So there is upside to Drake, I think.
Yep. So we projected the team to rush the ball about the same amount of times. We just split it up differently. So I do think Drake gets featured to some extent, at least more so than the 120 attempts he saw last season, just partially in part due to the criminally low number of plays the Dolphins ran. I took a little bit different approach, though, whenever I went to project this, and I didn't look at the Dolphins. I looked at where this coaching staff came from, and it's Belichick disciples. So
True.
I looked at the current NFL Belichick disciples, Bill O'Brien. I used Dax for this, which for those of you that don't know, which is probably everybody, developing a database for us to use internally called Drink and Know Stuff, Dax for short. So I used that to take a look at Matt Patricia, Bill O'Brien, Josh McDaniels, and Bill Belichick himself, really, to see what the breakdown was. They averaged 464 rush attempts per season. It's roughly 50 more than Gase did. And with no one really behind him, I do see Kenyon Drake kind of eclipsing that 220 carry mark. Now, that's not to say Ballage is useless. I do think Ballage is about probably 80 to 100. And Gaskin gets involved as well. I agree with you that Kenyon Drake is going to see his targets go down. I only projected him at 66 versus the 80 some odd he had last year, but I do think he carries the ball more. When you look at his efficiency, he's been hyper efficient, elusive. His breakaway run rate is good. His evaded tackle rate, juke rate is good. There's no reason to think that he can't be featured other than the fact that Gase just didn't do it. So I do think he gets the chance to showcase that. And compared to Kalen Ballage, who did not show that elusiveness, that breakaway. I mean, his efficiency was good, but when you look at the advanced metrics, Drake was far and away the better of the two.
Oh, Drake is massively underrated. He's getting some talk. I think for me, what kept him away from that 200, he also was never featured as a featured back. Not, in college with Alabama, he was never the guy. He was drafted, I think, a lot of the same reasons Josh Jacobs does, and that's because of he's shown upside. He's elusive. He can break away. He's fast. He's a great receiving back. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, just like with you, I think they'll use him in that same way. I think they're going to feature Ballage just because he's bigger, and I think they're just going to run the football.
So you see it more 50-50-ish to where I see it a bit more probably like 70-30.
I want you to be right.
I want to be right too, but yeah,
I still want you to be right. I still think Ballage will see some sort of relevancy. Not a lot, especially if ever gets hurt, or especially if Drake does become the featured back. It's hard for me to see it until I actually see it for a full season.
Right. So projecting it, I have Drake slight efficiency bump, just under 1,000 yards, 5 rush touchdowns, 66 targets for another 300 receiving yards. So about 1,200 scrimmage yards in total. But Kalen Ballage, also, I've got him projected for around 500 scrimmage yards as well. And a part of that is that I think a lot of this team's, if they're going to move the football, it's going to have to come from the backs, because the wide receiver core, which we're about to transition to, is just, it's absolutely gross.
Yes.
I mean, the question I posed was, Devontae Parker finally step up with a new QB at the helm, or is Kenny still the best bet at wide receiver? And then after I projected it, the answer was kind of neither. I don't know what you ended up on.
It's Stills.
Barely for me.
It just depends on how long Fitzpatrick is held off, or not Fitzpatrick, Rosen's held off from Fitz. I actually, Stills, I got him at 102 targets. I think that maybe a bit of a reach there, but they got to throw the ball to somebody. And he's the only one outside of some freak injuries that have actually been able to stay healthy and show consistency, on a, year-to-year basis. But again, like we said, this is a new coaching staff. So again, who knows this is going to be. I got him at just shy of 900 yards and 6 touchdowns, because I still think Fitz is going to, is just going to chuck the football deep. And Rosen's going to have to fall in love with somebody. I don't think it's going to be Parker. It probably won't be Wilson. And, Bryce Butler may see the field at some point, just given the lack of health, on this roster.
Yep, I projected all of them. I had Parker at 91 targets, Stills at 78. But similar yardage and similar touchdown numbers, honestly. So, I mean, target volume aside, I do think that they're pretty evenly matched, just because you don't really know. Stills has done it, but the other thing that I put into these projections is I only have Fitzpatrick starting through the bye week, and then I have them switching to Rosen based on how I projected their one-loss record to go.
When was their bye week? Is it week 5, right?
Week 5.
'Cause I have them the same.
Yeah.
And that's not week 5. Never mind.
It is week 5, but
Yeah, I have them the same then.
I have Rosen taking over after the bye week, and I think that actually hurts Kenny Stills because Rosen doesn't have the deep ball, like Ryan Fitzpatrick does. I see Parker being more of a Josh Rosen type of wide receiver, but I also see Rosen's peripherals being worse than Fitzpatrick's whenever that happens.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The other thing to talk about here in this passing game, though, is Mike Gesicki, and I think he's probably the Dolphins' best chance of success as far as moving the football through something other than running backs go. And offenses of Belichick proteges target the tight end roughly 19% of the time, even with a slight downward adjustment for the offensive ineptitude of the Dolphins. So I think that means Gesicki is going to see somewhere upwards of 60 targets as a floor, which is definitely an uptick for him. There's nobody really behind him, though. And if they try to run this like New England, which is kind of what you're seeing Patricia do in Detroit, and without any real wide receiver options that are attractive or a surefire thing, I could see Gesicki seeing an uptick. I'm not saying he's top 12. He's probably in streamer territory, but I think that that's probably their best bet at doing anything in the passing game is him taking a step up.
I completely agree. I have him at 78 targets this year, just shy of 600 yards, 1 touchdown. I again, just like the Bills, I don't see this offense producing. I don't see a lot of red zone work in this offense. And what Gesicki is extremely athletic, as we saw last year. He doesn't really have the offense, or he doesn't. I just don't see the offense taking enough steps to actually score touchdowns. So he'll lack there. I think you may see a couple tight end 1 finishes, for whatever that's worth throughout the season. So I do agree that he'll be streamable, and I think he'll be a guy that you can pick up through bye weeks in good matchups and kind of trust if we can see some sort of consistency to start the year out. But I do have him taking the next step. I still think it takes him a couple more years to finally get developed and for this Dolphins offense to kind of show what it's actually made of.
I think so too, and I think that they're going to have to go out and get probably a quarterback that's not on their roster right now, a big-time wide receiver, and make some improvements on offense and defense before that happens. They're kind of in that weird bridge mode right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing the right things. I don't know if I would have brought Fitz in because I think he'll win games, and I think they like to. I think they're going to try to tank for a quarterback either this year or in 2020 or 2021. So until then, Dolphins fans are gonna have to put up with this.
Yeah. All right, I got nothing else on the Dolphins. Do you?
No.
All right, let's go ahead and hit a beer review, and then we'll talk Jets and Patriots.
Beer review.
All right, Dan, what did you think of Brony from Illuminated Brewworks out of Chicago?
I think it's fantastic. The juice really sticks out. There's strawberry on there. There's I get a little bit of grapefruit and other tropical notes to it, but that's a big up to the Citra and to some of the other hops that are a part of this. It finishes dry because it does use Helen Malone, which is a notably unpopular dry or hop that that breweries will use. So it's if you're looking for a good double dry hopped IPA or just a good hazy in general, I think this is a good start. I know the 4-packs are a bit pricey, but this is definitely one I would consider trying for our hazy fans out there.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I had Flamingo Dreams from Left Hand Brewing Company out of Longmont, Colorado. It's a nitro, and I have a love-hate relationship with nitros. There's some things that, if they have really good flavor, are good. There's other beers that, if they don't have really good flavor, just tastes flat. And that's kind of the bugaboo of nitro. It brings out all of the other flavors. In this case, it's a good nitro. The berry really shows. It is a blonde ale, so you get kind of a milder, for lack of a better term, beer taste at the end of it. But it's super juicy up front. It's almost like you're drinking juice on the front end of it before you get that slight beer aftertaste. The nitro really, really smooths it out. So it's actually a really solid, like, poolside summer drinker, which is good because my pool just opened. So,
Nice.
yeah, incredibly good job. It's probably about the second nitro I've had that I actually like. So Solid work by left hand.
Good. I'll have to try that now.
Yeah, you should. Katrina would probably like it too.
Probably.
That being said, thank you to Illuminated and Left Hand Brewing for having your beers on. Not that you had a choice, because you absolutely didn't. Let's go ahead and get to the Jets. So the Jets are unlike the first two teams we talked about. I do see Le'Veon Bell, Robbie Anderson, and Chris Herndon as all being guys that you want to target and try to own.
I completely agree.
Especially when you break down this offense. I don't necessarily see anything beyond that. Sam Darnold's intriguing in Superflex, but I do think that those three guys I just mentioned are guys that you're going to want to target. I do think that they'll be Herndon's going to be top 12. The other two will be top 24 easily. So some key things that you got to follow with this team. How will this Bell adapt to this new team and after a year off? How do you have Le'Veon Bell adjusting to the Jets?
I'm a big fan because just from what we've seen from him, during his time in Pittsburgh, I know that this offense is in Pittsburgh but I think they want to have Bell be the running back of the future, at least for the next 2 to 3 years. So I do have his rushes. I think he's normally seen over 300 if he's played a full year. And then I think his 16-game pace through those short seasons were well over 300. So I have him at 288 in rushes, but 1,800 total yards because of his work in the passing game. And the fact that he can be a reliable check down and just a reliable receiving target for Sam Darnold. So 92 targets, which I think is pretty fair because I think he's done that a couple times when he's played in Pittsburgh. I got him right now out of the out of all the teams I've done, he's my RB3, and that's with the AFC East and then 3 out of the 4 teams in the NFC East. So there's a lot of upside for Bell. I think he'll pay off for those people that take him into, back into the first, early second, because there's still a lot of potential. And the fact that he hasn't been a part of, he hasn't taken contact in 2 years, I think he'll be fine.
So looking at Adam Gase and Dal Logans, they average about 425 rushes ish per offense, and about, we'll call it 950 offensive plays. I did go bump that up because I expect this offense to take a step forward, and I expect them to utilize Le'Veon Bell. We've seen specifically with Gase's time in Chicago that if he's given a pass-catching running back, he will adjust his offense to use that. And I do think that given the amount that these two, having been in the same place together, having worked together, that is the head coach and the offensive coordinator, and with Elijah McGuire being the only other real back right now with Isaiah Crowell lost.
Well, he's gone anyway.
To the Raiders. I mean, he's gone, not there. Yes. And Bilal Powell gone and not there. I do think Bell has most of those, 75% of those carries to himself. So I projected the team to have 425 carries. Bell at roughly 75% of that. I got him at about 320 carries, about on pace for where he was in Pittsburgh. I see his efficiency kind of being 2017 levels of bad, but I also see him at 100-plus targets as well. And that, again, goes back to both of these guys kind of showing that. I mean, they're right around 100 targets per the running back on average between them. And, with Matt Forte, we saw Gase get him fed 130-plus balls. Now, I don't think that happens with the likes of Robbie Anderson and Jamison Crowder looming and Chris Herndon, but I had projected Sam Darnold to take a step forward, the offense as a whole to take a step forward, and I think that bodes well for Le'Veon Bell, who's going to be the feature piece.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Bell. I know we don't have – I'm a little bit less than that because I just don't think they're going to try to beat him to the ground the way that Pittsburgh did. So they'll try to find ways to, to get other running backs involved. But, yes, the passing game will be fine.
The hard part I had with other running backs is who? Trenton Cannon? Because that's Elijah McGuire. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. It just depends how many rushes this team takes. And just if the offense goes and they get up and, they get up in games or if they get behind and they got to throw more. But either way, I'm a big fan of Bell as a bounce back guy.
Yeah. So you know about Robbie Anderson. Do you see Crowder or Nunwa being worth much draft capital at all?
Well, you know me and my love of Crowder, so it's I do have him as a number 2 here, at least in terms of targets. I have him just shy of 100 targets, just shy of 800 yards. Not a lot of touchdowns because that's not his role. People are going to point to Jarvis Landry with Gase there in Miami. Crowder is not Jarvis Landry at this point. And I don't see in the fact that he's got, competition with receiving targets and not just in Robbie Anderson and Bell, but in Chris Herndon as well. So I think he'll be serviceable as a bye week guy, especially if this offense does take a step forward because these numbers couldn't rise. He's been fairly healthy outside of last year. So I do got him only playing 15 games. But as for Nunwa, I just don't see him involved. I think he gets behind Crowder. And just I don't have a whole lot of faith in him. I do have him just shy of of 80 targets, 600 yards. Again, 3 touchdowns because he can flash, but he falls behind the other 2 for me.
I'm with you. Nunwa definitely falls behind the other 2 for me. I don't see him doing a whole lot. With Crowder there, he's going to be forced outside. He's not the most athletic guy. I do see him kind of being more of the red zone threat because that's kind of what he was good at when he was healthy. Hasn't been healthy in a few years. As for Crowder, a little more tepid than you, but I do see him bouncing back. I see him kind of in an Adam Humphries type 82 targets and 650-ish yards type of range. So, I don't necessarily see the 90 and 800, which would put him in solid wide receiver 3 territory. I do see him more towards the back end of that, but I do see it as a bounce back and a little bit of a resurgence from last year. Like you, have him missing time. As far as significant draft capital, no, Crowder to me is around 6 to 8 guy, depending on how you feel about him. And Anun was not draftable, in my opinion.
Exactly. I mean, I guess Crowder for me is that when he's been healthy and he's been able to be productive in offenses that have had similar type of receivers. With Washington, you had to deal with Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, Terrell Pryor, I guess is a thing. So he's been able to at least find production given competition. But should we just quickly hit on Robbie Anderson? Because I got kind of a crush if he can remain healthy because what we saw last year with Sam Darnold.
I was going to talk about Robbie Anderson a bit later on.
Okay, that's fine.
At the end of the episode where I talk about guys we're targeting and guys we're not, because Robbie Anderson is a guy that I have written down. So
more on that later.
The thing with Crowder is with Garçon, he didn't really break out until after Garçon was kind of gone and he was the guy.
Yeah,
and
true.
He's at least 3rd in the pecking order here to me. So that's kind of why I'm a little more tepid.
That's completely fine.
Moving on to 2 guys that I am super excited about, though. Chris Herndon and Sam Darnold, both second-year players. And I think both of these guys are going to massively improve. Darnold already showed late last season that he was starting to improve. I think he's going to continue to build on that. A healthy Anun was not going to hurt him in the red zone, or a stud running back definitely isn't going to hurt. I see him making some moderate to major improvements in all categories. I'm thinking kind of the Mitch Trubisky curve for him. Maybe not quite the rushing upside, but a guy that kind of started out being in the 20s, not very exciting, to where he gives you some QB1 weeks, even though it may not necessarily be consistent, and taking that next step. I've got Sam Darnold projected for 3,800 yards, 22 pass touchdowns, just 13 interceptions on 535 attempts.
Wow. So 536 attempts, 38, 25, 27 touchdowns because the offense improves, 16 interceptions because he does throw the football more. And we've seen in his last year with USC and at times last year, he is pretty wild with the football. Like you said, no rushing upside to him, but I got him at least scoring 1 rushing touchdown.
A little bit of rushing upside. I got him for over 100 yards and a rush touchdown. I mean, he did have 150-ish last year. So
I got him at 50 rushes, 158 yards and a touchdown, 1 fumble, 17 total turnovers. So there is some boom and bust to him. But we expect this offense to take that next step. So Darnold is going to, at least for me, will likely be in the 15 to 20 range for QBs, and probably a very popular streaming candidate throughout the year.
Yep.
At least in single QB leagues.
Yep. And Herndon to me does have kind of top tight end value here, top 10 tight end value. he was top 10 in yards per target, yards per reception, true catch rate, average target distance, showing that he's efficient with his targets. I think he averaged like 12.5 yards per last year. I've got Herndon tagged for 81 targets and 700 plus yards with 5 touchdowns. I think
we're about the same.
I think that he's going to make some massive improvements here. And when you look at Adam Gase and Dow Logans and what they've done with tight ends, I mean, they are the products of Martellus Bennett and Julius Thomas. You know, they average about 95 to 98 tight end targets a season. You know, it's based on both of them. Again, that's a composite number that I throw together, which averages together the offense, the team, the offensive coordinator, and the head coach, and then looks at how often they target each position. And there isn't really anything behind Herndon. We've kind of had a running joke that the Jets are just stacking mediocre backup tight ends, and there's no real threat to him. So
No, there's not.
I do think that Herndon is absolutely top 10, probably top 7 as far as tight ends go this season.
I got him at 74 targets, just shy of 700 yards, but 6 touchdowns. The way that he was used last year, at least when he was on his hot streak, red zone. That's all. Like big plays in red zone. He did kind of fall off a bit in the second half of the season when Robbie Anderson started to get going. So that's why I think there could be some times where he does give you some lull weeks. But again, after the top 3 tight ends in Kittle, Ertz, and Kelsey, you're just taking dart throws at that point. And maybe OJ Howard, for a top 4 if you want to throw that out there. So I'm a big fan of Chris Herndon. I think you can still get him at a decent value. I don't know what his ADP is, but at this point it shouldn't matter. But like again, with the improvement of this offense, he should improve with it. And I don't see, outside of maybe a Newell, I don't see a whole lot of other red zone threats to him.
No, there's not. So I mean, even Le'Veon Bell is not necessarily a bruiser in the red zone. So I think that mostly is Herndon.
Yeah, there's a very good chance that he could be that tight end, kind of have that minor Zach Ertz breakout that we saw, 3-4 years ago, and really put him on the map to be the big breakout next year in year 3.
Yep. All right, so that covers the Jets. Basically, you're looking Le'Veon Bell, Robbie Anderson, Chris Herndon with some intrigue in Jamison Crowder there in the mid rounds. Let's move on to the Patriots. Must-owns here look to be Tom Brady, Julian Edelman, Sony Michel, and James White. I think that they're all pretty well locks. Some intrigue here, though. So first off, let's talk Brady. He had a down year last year. Do you see much of a bounce back for him? Do you think there's kind of is what he is now?
I think we kind of know, because we've expected to see a massive downtick, as he gets older, but he just seems to kind of be the same Brady. I got him at 581 attempts. That may be a little high, but I think we always think that's going to come down. He'll break 4,200 yards. I got 30 touchdowns because he seems to find ways to score touchdowns. This is with and without Gronk. So the loss of Gronk now, I don't think changes a whole lot. He's become more efficient with the football in terms of interceptions, so that's down a bit. I don't know if he'll be top 12. He'll likely project to be top 12. But I think more people out there are going to assume the loss of Gronk, they're not going to want to take a chance on Brady. And I think Brady could provide some value as a late round quarterback dart throw.
The thing with Brady is he has so much name cachet. Is I don't know among casual players if you're going to get him, because I do not think that he is the premium tier QB that he was. I have no doubt that he's top 12, but he's not going to throw the ball 600 plus times again, I don't think. And you've kind of seen a downtick in his number of pass attempts over the last 3 to 4 years. I've got him at 570 attempts. Very, very similar, though, in the yardage, though. I've got him at 4,400 yards. Part of this, the loss of Gronk, okay, sure. You add N'Keal Harry, you get a full season of Julian Edelman back, plus a very solid running back stable. I got him at 4,400 yards, 30 touchdowns, and the interceptions coming down from last year to 9 from 12. So
we're almost identical.
Still a very, very solid season from Tom Brady, but I don't think he bounces back to be that, top 2 or 3 quarterback that you're used to him being. I think he's more one of those mid QB ones that you look at between rounds 8 and 10 versus really, really reaching for him. And if somebody wants to reach for him, let him, because I don't think that this is the same guy that's going to go out and throw the football 650 times or even 615 times and and get it done that way.
I'm not sure who still thinks that. I'm sure there's going to be casual people out there, like you said, they're going to reach on them just because of name or just because they're Patriot fans. I think you'll be fine drafting Brady. Just because of how he's been. I'm just more afraid of when the team runs the football well, they're going to continue to run. And I almost think they kind of know like ahead of time when they want to, run and throw in terms of like 6-7 games on the line, because it feels like if it's a run heavy game, they're just gonna just keep pounding the football.
Yep. All right. How do you think Damian Harris impacts Sony Michel and James White?
He doesn't affect James White because I just don't see how that becomes a thing. But I do think he's going to cut into Sony Michel's rushing work. I don't know by how much. Michel was on pace for over 200 rushes last year. At least his 16-game pace was. I think he'll get the same 16-game pace, but I do think Michel is going to miss a couple games this year. So I think Harris is going to have some value to that, especially in games that Michel doesn't play in, because he'll be the guy that's going to, be the next man up. I don't see White doing that, but White should continue to be massively productive in the receiving game.
So I've got Sony Michel getting less than 50% of the carries, but that being said, this is a team that runs about 450 times a year. I do have Michel in 14 games carrying the ball 210 times. I think what Damian Harris does is caps Sony Michel's upside.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that that's about the same pace he was on. I don't think that have the same upside you thought you had with Sony Michel. I've got Damian Harris carrying the ball 165 times, so it's more of a 60-40 split between those two. Harris keeping Michel from having to carry the ball 20 times a game. At 210 puts him at an average of about 15.6 a game. It gives Harris in the 11 to 12 touches per game. Carries per game. I don't think he cuts into James White all that much. I don't see James White getting 123 targets again. I have him at about 108, which is still very, very good for a running back. What I do see him doing, though, is I don't see James White rushing the football 123 times again either, like he did last season. I see James White back down to below 75 rush attempts, which still makes him a very, very good PPR and half PPR option. Not the same juggernaut he was last season, and I agree Damian Harris does have some running back 3-4 flex-ish value while also capping the upside that you could potentially see from Sony Michel. He keeps Sony Michel as a running back 2 to me.
I got to ask, did you project out Rex Burkhead?
No.
Okay, I did, just because they like to keep running backs on the roster. I do think they'll cut him. I couldn't not project him at this point. So that's cut into some of the rushing attempts for Harris. I do agree with White. I came down a bit heavier on his targets. They got him down to 84 because just we've seen what this offense can be with three healthy running backs. But again, that could change because I feel a little bit meh on the 84, so I may bump that up a little bit.
Well, and if Burkhead is kept, I think it's a little bit here, a little bit there. He's probably going to take about, I would say 20 to 30 from Sony Michel, 40 to 50 from Damian Harris, and maybe 10 to 15 from James White, and get his that way. So, I mean, I still think that, Sony Michel, you're looking at 190 to 210, and Damian Harris between 110 and 160. I mean, it's a range. He's a rookie, so.
Exactly. I mean, it's not that far off. Again, it's not the funnest to project Patriot running backs, but I still see I still feel like there is some clarity to this backfield. It's more so than what it's been the last.
Yeah, I don't know that Rex Burkhead's a
6-7
major
years.
player. That's how I project.
I don't either. And when he gets cut, they'll divvy out his pieces because I do think he's a number 2 pass catcher. So I do think at times that may hurt White. I don't know by how much, but they do like Burkhead. So.
Yeah. So I think from talking before the show, we can both agree on this next one. Do you think a tight end steps up without Gronk there?
Fuck no.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I also say no. Adjusted for the suspension, see ASJ with about 41 targets, Ben Watson with 21, and neither of them eclipsing 300 yards or more than 2 touchdowns.
I have split at targets, 33 for ASJ, 31 for Ben Watson. Now this is prior to the suspension, because I do think they're going to be split. ASJ has never played more than 13 games in a year, so I don't see how that even changes. I got him at 10 games, so I do think he'll be overdrafted in every single league. I agree with you that he's not going to eclipse 300 yards. I do think they'll get a couple touchdowns apiece because Brady loves to just randomly give tight ends and backup tight ends not named Gronk touchdowns, and that will remain. They'll, of course, remain the same without Gronk playing, but he's very random in the red zone.
Yeah.
I feel like it's not just one person that he targets down there.
It's not. Speaking of ASJ, by the way, just mentioning that hype, he's never had 400 receiving yards, and outside of 150 reception season, his next highest is 21 twice. So,
and he was the only guy in New York with the Jets, of course, that he's got massive competition from across the board. And it's not like Ben Watson's a terrible tight end, even though he's a lot older and now he's suspended for 4 games. I just don't I don't see Ben Watson going away.
All right. Fair expectations for N'Keal Harry in year 1.
That's tough because we haven't seen what the Patriots have done with the first round wide receiver. This is in my opinion, this is their best outside receiver since Randy Moss. And yes, that's including Josh Gordon. So for me, he was a bit hard to project. I got him at 76 targets, this shy of 700 yards. I do got him at 6 touchdowns, though, so he will provide some value throughout bye weeks. But he's gonna not be this wide receiver 1 or 2. It's very hard for rookie receivers to break out. So I think people have to assume that he's not going to put up wide receiver 2 numbers, maybe expect 3. So that's kind of where I have him at right now.
I kind of think he's a 3 with upside. Where my projections landed him was 58 receptions on 93 targets, 773 yards, and 7 touchdowns, which is a very solid season. He is number 2 on that team for me, just because when you look behind him, unless Demaryius Thomas is healthy and can contribute, which, by the way, for my projections, he is healthy and can contribute. He's the 3rd on this team. Not a whole lot of depth with Josh Gordon suspended, so they are going to have to rely on N'Keal Harry some of the passing game because Julian Edelman can't do all of it, and Gronk is gone. And that's where I have a lot of Gronk's targets going, and I think the fact that they did spend a first-round pick on N'Keal Harry and not a Noah Fant or TJ Hawkinson tells me that
they were both gone, too. So
they were, but they could have they moved back, if I remember correctly.
No, they stayed at 32.
Did they?
Yeah.
They didn't move
But either
up.
way, I mean, it's really difficult to know what this receiving core is going to do with.
And you still had Sternberger. You still had viable tight ends that they could have taken, and they didn't draft one. So the point stands. They weren't looking for a Gronk replacement. They were looking for somebody else that could come in and be a red zone threat, which N'Keal Harry will be, given his contested catch. He's going to be targeted because there is 100-plus targets that are up for grabs on this team, and they didn't really sign anybody to come take them. So Demaryius Thomas, I have it 46 receptions, 72 targets, 500 yards, which not really going to make him draftable. But, again, it's Tom Brady throwing the football. He's still an accurate quarterback. He's still efficient with it, even if he's not throwing 600-plus times. So, N'Keal Harry, I think that you can look at kind of Cortland Sutton's 83 targets last year and expect that to be his floor, the worst possible scenario.
That is completely fair. I do have Thomas not playing 16 games because I don't see how he comes back from Achilles tear and plays a full season. So I do have him playing half. If we're doing a 16-game spread out, he will be productive as the wide receiver 3.
I got him at 16 just because he was already running routes and everything.
True. And like I said, things are going to change at this point.
Things will change a lot at this point. So we'll revisit this in a Risers and Sliders episode later in the season, but things are going to change a lot.
Yes.
All right. Anything else on the Patriots before we wrap it up?
Nope.
All right. So as the wrap-up portion of the show, we got 2 things. So looking at the AFC East as a whole, who do you see as guys you're kind of targeting, and who are you looking at as guys that you're kind of avoiding? Just give 2 or 3 names for each.
Drake, Edelman, White, Anderson are guys I'm going after from this division. Easy avoids Pat tight ends and most other receivers in this division.
Yep. I'm shooting it Robbie Anderson, Chris Herndon, Kenyon Drake, obviously Julian Edelman. the Patriots backs we talked about are probably going to be fine. I'm personally avoiding Patriots tight ends, and I had John Brown written down as well, just because for all the reasons I mentioned earlier in the episode. So backtrack if you want to check that out. As for final division standings here, the way that we predicted the division to finish the same, and we predicted everybody but two teams with the same record. We both had the Patriots at 12-4, had the Jets coming in second here. I had them at 9-7. Dan had them at 8-8. Both have the Bills going 6-10, and the Dolphins bringing up the rear. I've got them at 4-12. Dan has them at 3-13.
It's gonna be gross. Patriot heavy again because that's just how.
Because
it goes.
until the other teams in the division get better, the Patriots are just gonna. Did have the Jets beating them though.
Yeah. So I think before we wrap this up, we did tease a little bit of Robbie Anderson talk. So what do you have his numbers projected out? That he's both a standout for us.
Let me flip back to the Jets real quick. I know it was 888 yards because that's easy to remember.
I'm a bit higher on him than
probably.
I'm
so
just a big fan of what I saw.
I had him at 112 targets, 53.6 reception percentage, 14.8 yards per reception, which comes out to 60 receptions, 888 yards, and 7 touchdowns.
Pretty much spot on with catch percentage and literally spot on yards per reception. I got him at 127 targets, so 69 receptions. Just breaks 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. You got to see upside the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season last year when Darnold took that big step forward.
Mm-hmm.
They brought him back because he's a piece of this offense. He is the number one in this offense. So if he can keep his nose clean and stay healthy, I think he's going to take a big step and someone that I'm going to be excited to look at in whatever round he's going. And I've got to assume 6 and 7 is about where he's going now. And I think he'll rise as people keep doing their
So just out of curiosity, what do you have a Nunwa at? Because I think that based on what you said about Crowder and what you said about Anderson and the fact that we're so close on Herndon, I'm curious as to where you have a Nunwa.
Nunwa 75 targets, 53.9 catch percentage, 13.7 yards per reception. So 40 receptions, 548 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
I'm trying to figure out where we're massively different on targets because we both had Darnold in the 535 range for pass attempts, right?
Yep. Yep. I think it just comes with the targets from.
I had 77 targets left over for him. That's what it is.
Yeah, I don't do, every single running back or wide receiver, tight end to project. So there is some leftover.
I don't either. I had 77 left over, which I think is where a lot of the difference is. If you left left over, but yeah,
I may be right around that point.
So I think that we can both agree that despite that, Robbie Anderson is going to be the best receiver on that team, probably the second best receiver in the division behind Edelman. And really not gonna disappoint, especially if you can get him as your second guy after that first year's gone. I think I think we both can agree that he's a lock for 110 plus targets. You had him at 127. I had him at 112, 800 to 1,000 yards, and to lead the team in touchdowns.
Yeah.
So
what about Edelman? We didn't touch on him. I'm sure there's people at home wondering how we think.
Sure.
Because if he plays a full 16-game season, there is a lot of upside.
All right, so I have Edelman at 117 targets, 69.1% catch rate, 11.4 yards per reception, which works out to 81 receptions, 922 yards, and 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, I match you on the yards per receptions, but everything else is massively increased. So when Edelman plays a full 16 games, he's at 150 targets and 159. And he's eclipsed 100 receptions once. Without Gronk and the fact that he is the focal point of this offense, a full year removed from his ACL injury, I have him 163 targets because he's the true one. 110 receptions, 67.5 catch rate. That's where that comes from. So 1,250 yards and 6 touchdowns because he's not a big touchdown guy. So our differences is our targets.
I think I'm being a bit higher on Harry.
that's probably where that makeup comes from. I think just Brady will lean on Edelman even more so without his empty blanket and Gronk and the fact that he's
And I
completely
think I'm
healthy.
probably higher on White, but I've also got 48-ish targets left over on this team going to people I didn't project.
Yeah. So
Oh,
we kinda
Dorsett.
agree. What's that?
I also projected out Philip Dorsett.
I did too.
Not
I
well,
don't
though.
project him to do much.
No,
But,
I didn't either. But
no.
yeah, so Julian Edelman definitely was worth mentioning there. Anybody else that we didn't mention that we should probably compare notes on?
I don't think
think
so.
we're okay.
There's nobody really else from Miami or from Buffalo that's worth talking
No,
about.
we talked Parker Stills. We didn't talk Albert Wilson, who I think is going to get a lot of hype. I didn't project him great.
I projected him to be the number 2 because kind of ish. I actually have him tied with Parker in almost everything. I just don't have a lot of faith in Parker. I have them both at 66 targets a piece between Wilson and Parker. I'm also higher on Wilson.
It'll change if there's news that breaks that Wilson's healthy, but right now he's
I have
still
not
missing
done the
time because
projection
of the
post
hip.
his injury, so that will change.
I've only got him playing 12 games, which is why Parker's
I got him
ahead.
at 13 right now.
So
either way, you're not going to draft a lot of. You'll probably won't draft any Dolphins receiver.
You
I think
shouldn't.
will get drafted, but you don't. You shouldn't, at least.
No, you absolutely shouldn't. All right, anything else we need to talk about with the AFC East before we go ahead and wrap this guy up?
No, let's get done with this division.
All right, we will continue our division previews next week as we go on to, I think I have the NFC East.
Yes.
Yes. So as we go on to the NFC East next week, we'll go ahead and do kind of the same format and fill that one out for you. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at HotBFF with 2 P's. Dan, where can the people find you?
At 30BFF with 2 F's.
You can also follow the show at BeerfieldFF, Twitter, Instagram, Untapped. If you like what you see, go ahead and give us a follow. Beerfield Fantasy Football on YouTube and Facebook. If you like what you're hearing, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification thingamajig so that you know when we do go live on YouTube. It was a good time for Q&A, so if you have anything you want to ask us, players you want to ask us about, how we project somebody, YouTube is the perfect place to do that. We do stream every recording session live. You can also catch the episode before we release it to Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, everywhere else we go. So
Podbean and everything else.
Yeah, you should be sure to check that out. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for listening, as always. And we will catch you sometime next week on Beerfield Fantasy Football. See ya.
Peace.
I don't have the outro ready. Professional show, guys. Real professional. Hold on. Forgot to stop the stream.